Someone calls 911 and Canadians show up. A library sits across two countries. One step in wrong direction and you've crossed an international border. That's not a hypothetical. That's Tuesday. The US-Canada border runs 5,525 miles. That's longer than the distance from Los Angeles to Tokyo and back. And at no point along that stretch will you find military zones, guard towers, or soldiers. Any border this long would look like a fault line. This one looks like nothing. The calm is real, the logic is not, because this border was never drawn by anyone who actually walked the land. Diplomats sat thousands of miles away, working from maps they were wrong. Lakes shaped like rough guesses, rivers placed in wrong position, coastlines drawn by someone who'd clearly never been there. Treaties got signed before anyone checked, mistakes became permanent. Once ink dried an international agreement, nobody wanted to reopen it. That meant renegotiating claims, redrawing legal documents, potentially giving up land and upsetting voting boundaries, so they left the errors where they were. The result is a border that starts at the Atlantic Ocean between Maine and New Brunswick, cuts through forests and mountains and frozen plateaus, and slices through communities that existed long before any line was drawn through them. Every strange point on this map is a decision someone refused to fix. The northwest angle, the oldest mistake, is also the most visible. The northwest angle in Minnesota is the only part of the continental United States that sits above Canada's territorial boundary. On a world map, a small chunk of America is physically surrounded by Canada, not near it, inside it. To get there legally, American citizens must leave the United States, enter Canada, drive through Canadian territory, then re-enter the United States. That applies to everyone: residents, deliveries, school buses. School buses leave the country every morning just to reach a school. If someone calls an ambulance, it often arrives from Canada first, not because of policy, because Canada is closer. Why does this exist? British cartographer once drew Lake of the Woods as a perfect oval. It isn't, but the Treaty of Paris locked that shape into international law before anyone verified it. When the accurate map was eventually drawn, officials discovered a strip of land extending above the boundary, land that technically belonged to the United States. Fixing it meant rewriting international agreements, so they didn't fix it. Make sure to subscribe, because the opposite version of this problem is even stranger. Point Roberts, Washington. Point Roberts, Washington is an American town sitting below Canada, like someone dropped it in the wrong country and nobody bothered to pick it up. When the 49th parallel was finalized, that line ran straight through the Tuazon Peninsula. Nobody curved it around the landmass. Everything south of that invisible line became American soil, even though residents there had no practical path to the rest of America that didn't pass through Canada. Groceries require a Canadian border crossing. A school means kids pass through the Canadian checkpoints twice a day, every day. Delivery workers need dual clearance. Ambulances cross borders mid-route. During the 2020 travel restrictions, residents reported that milk, baby formula, medicine and pet food required the special approvals. The entire local economy collapses whenever Canadian travel slows. Point Roberts is so embedded in Canadian daily life that residents once joked, if Canada took over, we wouldn't even notice. That joke hits differently when it's probably true. But this goes both ways. Canadians are just as dependent on America in certain places. Campobello Island, New Brunswick. Campobello Island belongs to Canada. The only permanent road to it goes through Maine. Every family on that island crosses US territory more often than parts of their own country. The seasonal ferry connecting to mainland Canada shuts down during storms. When ice forms, it becomes unusable entirely. Emergency helicopters often land in US territory first. Canadian residents regularly buy food, medicine, and hardware from American businesses because travel to mainland Canada is slower, harder, and sometimes impossible in winter. Phone signals route through American towers. Children use American bus routes before transferring back. Petitions for a direct bridge onto mainland New Brunswick have existed for 40 years. Multiple engineering proposals, multiple governments, no progress, cost, environmental concerns, and politics stalled indefinitely. Canadian citizens continue living a life built largely on American infrastructure, not by choice, by geography. And then there are places where the border doesn't split towns. It splits buildings. Haskell Free Library and Opera House, Derby Line, Vermont. There's a library here where the reading room is in two countries simultaneously. The Haskell Free Library and Opera House was built deliberately on the border so that Canadians and Americans could share the space without either group leaving their country. The front entrance is in the United States. Most of the reading room floor is in Canada. A straight black line painted on the floor marks the boundary. Left side US soil, right side Canadian soil. A kid reading a book can shift 2 feet and technically be in a foreign country. During renovations, workers had to account for building codes and security laws from two governments. For decades, people entered from either side without border officers intervening. After 9/11, cameras went up, rules tightened, visitors must now enter officially from one designated side, but the black line on the floor remains exactly where it's always been. Nearby homes share the same problem. One house had a kitchen legally in Canada and bedrooms in the United States. Two tax systems, two fire departments, two legal jurisdictions determine by which side of the hallway you're standing on. Border Patrol once documented whether residents crossed during breakfast. That's still not the most extreme case. Hyder, Alaska. Hyder, Alaska is American territory that runs entirely in Canada. There is no road connecting Hyder to the rest of Alaska. The only way out is through British Columbia. Residents drive south into Canada to access hospitals, grocery stores, fire stations, and schools. Phone service is Canadian. Internet routes through Canadian networks. Children learn the Canadian curriculum depending on grade level. Stores price items in Canadian dollar because that's what people actually use. Hyder celebrates holidays on the Canadian calendar. When Canadian border workers once shut down the entry due to a staffing shortage, Hyder lost access to food, postal routes, and emergency medical transit. Federal officials had to reopen access specifically for Hyder residents. Legally, it's the United States. Practically, it's Canada. No map shows that, only the people living there can tell you. Conclusion: every single one of these places exists because of decisions made on paper by people who had never been there. Paper outranked geography, paper outranked logic, paper outranked the daily reality of people trying to get milk, get to school, or get to a hospital. And yet, no walls, no military patrols, no active conflict zones along 5,525 miles of shared border. Americans depend on Canadians. Canadians depend on Americans. Entire childhoods happen moving between countries. Two nations divided by treaty, functioning as one by necessity. The world's longest border is also the calmest. The most incorrectly drawn border is also one of the most functional. Geography tried to divide people. Daily life connected them anyway. That might be the most accidental success story in North America. Real One, subscribe.